Hey everybody, in this video we're going to highlight one of the topics we discussed in the Small Business Website Owner's Manual, and that is the topic of web hosting. So let's get started. Before we do anything else, we're going to talk about how web hosting works. And the way web hosting works is straightforward. So first you have your computer. You're sitting at your desk at home, in the coffee shop you have a computer, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to open up a browser. That browser can be Chrome, Firefox, or any other browser you want it to be. And you put the name of a website in, let's say CNN, and then your internet connection does its magic, and then you look on your browser and you have a website. So in its basic sense, that is how the internet works, and web hosting is somewhere living in there. So let's take a look a little bit deeper. So let's talk about how hosting your own website works. So we already have a computer, we've got a browser, and we have an internet connection. And that internet connection, what winds up happening is when you put in the name of a website here, CNN.com, it winds up going to a web server. And a web server is simply a computer somewhere in the cloud that stores your files that make up your website. Here are the files that make up your website, and it doesn't matter really what they are for this purpose, but these files are, you can have some HTML files, videos, images, doesn't matter. That's your website, because your website in and of itself is really just a collection of files. And we use a web browser like Chrome, Firefox, etc. to show those files. So what happens is now what you need to do is, here are the files. You worked very hard on them. You built this website, or your company built a website for you. And that website has to live somewhere on the internet. So when they say we're going to upload your website, that really means that you're going to upload the website to a server. And that server has special software on it, a web server software that knows how to convert this information we have here into a nice image on a browser or a web page on a browser. You have all of your files. When we say we're going to upload it to the internet, we're really uploading it to one of these web servers. So for example, if you come over here and you type in CNN, then here you type CNN. So now your internet connection, it knows, for reasons, we're going to make this into a little box here. Doesn't matter how. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But what happens is your internet server knows, your internet provider knows that, let's say this box here, that's CNN. And then you want Amazon, well, that's over here. And you want Netflix, well, that's over here. So what has to happen is just how, all of Amazon's products are stored there and Netflix are stored there. In reality, by the way, there are, hundreds of thousands, for Netflix of servers, but it doesn't matter. But the idea is that in order to get your web page from here, some files sitting on someone's computer, to the point where someone at home on a browser connected to the internet can access your files, you have to have a web host. And that's what web hosting is. Web hosting is the process by which we take files that make up your website and store them on the internet. And A, right, we store them on the internet on a server, and B, make them accessible to the web. You could certainly have files that are uploaded that no one can get to, but that doesn't make any sense. So what we do is then you have to get yourself a web host. Now, what many people will do, I think it makes a lot of sense, is to host with the people who built your website. And you don't have to, you can host with anybody you want. Part of the reason, it depends on who you're working with, but part of the reason you want to host with the people who built your website is because they know the ins and outs of this website, of the website itself, and what kind of technology you need to host it. So regardless, you've got your website files here, and now you've got a server. And usually we rent a server, it's monthly cost or yearly cost, and the server is designed so that not only does the server keep a copy of your files on it, it also has a connection to this whole section over here. So now if someone is here and they want to put on your website, well, what happens? It goes to the internet provider, goes to some magic over here that we'll talk about, and then all of a sudden your website is there. So a call's made to your website, and then what happens is the website sends the information back, and all of a sudden you're in your browser. So to look at that again, clean this up a little bit and look at that again. So what happens is you've got your website is over here. Here's the files that make up your website, and those files live on a web server, web server. And then what your web server knows how to do, your web server is special, and it knows how to connect here to make this the cloud, how to connect to the internet. So what winds up happening is if you go here and you type CNN, your browser connects to, your internet provider that knows, let's say CNN's here. But when you type in your website, yours, it knows to go here. And obviously the way the server works is that the requests information from the server, and the server sends the information for the website back. So here's your website that the files live on this server. You're on the computer, you go to your browser, you go to Chrome, then it pipes through, your internet connection, and it makes a request to this server and says, hey, please give me, this website, whatever it is. And the web server says, okay, right? Ever say loading, waiting, loading? Well, the web server sends the information back to your browser where you can now interact with it. So that, in a nutshell, is how web hosting works. And in order to get your website on the internet, you need to have a web host or a web hosting provider. Now let's talk about how DNS works, because the next question is going to be, well, if we know that we're here, right, we have our computer that connects to a browser, opening up Chrome, whatever we're going to do, and then it goes to the internet. How does it know which of these servers has what? Let's say that's Amazon, that's Netflix, this is your local community board, whatever it is, here's the school. How do we know that this web server right here is your website? So let's make your web server blue. This is your web server that has your files on it. We said from before, remember? Here's our website, and here's the files that live here. This is our web server. And so what has to happen is now when someone types in your name, we'll call it name, .com or whatever it is, right? Your name, that again, same thing's got to happen. It's got to go to the ISP, the web provider, which has to know somehow to find this server, which is you. And the way that works is DNS, the domain name system. We're not going to get into the technicalities of how that works, because it doesn't matter. But what that is, the question that becomes is, how do we know that name.com or yourbusiness.com actually winds up here? And so through a process that, again, we're not going to talk about, that works when you set up the web host, what happens is your web host winds up knowing your web server is set up in such a way that it says, hey, this right here, this is my website, mywebsites.com. And this web server also knows to tell the cloud, the whole world, everybody, that this is the server where you can find this website. So now when you are here at home and you go to the browser and you type it, or anywhere actually, and you type in the name of mywebsite.com, same thing, it goes to your service provider that now knows, because of DNS, which we're not going to get into, it knows that where to find mywebsite.com. Hey, it lives on this server. And the parallel to this is the post office. If this is your office building here, let's say here are some files in your office that you want to get to. You want someone to pick up some files, or someone wants to send you a letter. It's an even better example. In the letter we have to address it. Short Hills Design, 123 Main Street, anywhere in New Jersey, zip code. And all that information goes on the letter. And that letter, through the magic of the post office, winds up, magic, the post office somehow gets that letter to the second floor of this building, where your office is. This is you in your office where you are. Give you a smiley. So that is how the post office works. So you could think of the domain name system in a very similar way. Because over here, let's change color here for a sec. The equivalent website that you're requesting through your internet service provider, and the internet service provider says, okay, here's the address of the website I want to go to, mywebsite.com. Well, here's the address, Short Hills Design, 123 Main Street, blah, 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 blah. Internet service provider can talk to the internet and find out what is the address, where does mywebsite.com, where's the computer it matches up to. So same thing here. Here is a letter, and the post office, again, they may fly it there in an airplane, right? They may, do it in one of the trucks. But either way, for a reason that we don't need to know to get our mail, someone sends a letter to you, the post office figures out where it's going, and then it sends it to the right building and then the right floor. That is how web hosting works in a nutshell. And if you go back to the Small Business Website Owner's Manual, you'll see more information about recommendations for domain names and things you should avoid, and pearls and pitfalls about getting a domain name. What I will say now is you must always own your own name. Never let anybody else get the name for you. Always own it. So that's the end of today's lesson. Hopefully it was helpful. Please leave your comments or questions in the section below, and don't forget to subscribe, as we're going to be doing a lot more of these.